Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, June the 11th, 2024. Yesterday I talked about the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, with reference to the Paris Olympics, which are taking place at the end of next month. And I was looking at the Olympics in general and how they linked up with Emmanuel Macron's chart. Today, I'm going to talk about Emmanuel Macron again with reference to the European elections. So we're getting the results of the European elections. And in France, it seems that Emmanuel Macron is not happy with the results. The right-wing party of Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella did well, so well that Macron felt he had to respond. And so he responded by calling for new parliamentary elections. It's not presidential elections, but parliamentary elections. This is votes for the French parliament, not for the presidency. So he's called these elections, and it was a sort of a bit of a shock decision. And so I thought it might be a good idea to look at the astrological context for these elections. I also wanted to consider the horoscope of the European Union, set for when the Maastricht Treaty came into force, which I think was November the 1st, 1993. So I will be looking at that. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, June the 11th, 2024. So here is the chart for today. And you can see that the moon is still in Leo. So it's in Leo all day, unless you're on the west coast of America. So if you're in Los Angeles, the moon does go into Virgo at 10:39 p.m. It will go into Virgo even earlier if you're in Alaska or Hawaii. But overall, it is a moon in Leo day. And with the moon in Leo, we have the moon, its moon is in a fire sign, so there is that spark. There is a sense in which we have a feeling that something can happen. And some of us might also be quite proud. After all, the moon is in Leo. We do need some attention. But the moon in Leo is not quite the same as the sun in Leo. The moon in Leo is a little bit fragile. Yes, it wants attention, but there's sometimes a certain lack of confidence about it. Will I get that attention? And egos can be knocked pretty easily with the moon in Leo. But I don't want to exaggerate that. And towards the end of the day, especially in the Americas, the moon does start moving towards the royal star Regulus. There are differences of opinion about the royal star and what its orb is. Traditionally, in the 17th century, you could actually allow an orb of 5 degrees. So in other words, when the moon gets within 5 degrees of Regulus, you get the Regulus effect starts to happen. And so it may be the case that moon in late Leo is somewhat regal, and this might be a time when we can start attracting important people, whoever those important people are. It's all relative. Okay, we might think of an important person as Emmanuel Macron, President of France, and he's Emmanuel Macron. He has a very high opinion of himself, so he really is moon in Regulus. But maybe it could be someone, I don't know, if you're working, it could be your boss, for example. It all depends who you regard as being important and who's important in terms of your life. But perhaps we have a better chance than usual of attracting important people towards the end of the day. And the moon in Leo is making aspects. Now, yesterday when I was doing my forecasts, the moon was in Leo then, but I was having the issue that the moon wasn't really applying to anything. And so a lot of my forecasts for yesterday weren't really going anywhere because it said the moon was applying to nothing. Now, that is not quite the case now, okay? Late yesterday, the moon, I think, was applying to a sextile of Mercury. But now the moon is sextile the sun, and it's also sextile Venus, and it is making a square to Uranus. That sextile sun is good news. It's a very easy aspect. Moon in Leo, Sun in Gemini. Leo and Gemini are two signs that, all things being equal, get on pretty well with each other. And when you've got the moon and the sun and the moon in a fortunate aspect, there's a certain sense of union, that things are balanced and the life force is strong. And also, moon is sextile Venus. That is good for relationships of all kinds, and a sense of being more comfortable with people than we have been of late. So that's the lunar picture. Okay, I also need to throw in the fact that the moon is square Uranus. Now, a moon square Uranus, in some respects, is not such an important aspect as moon sextile sun. Even though a square is a stronger aspect than the sun, I regard the sun as perhaps being a more important planet than Uranus. It is the sun. Moon sextile sun can define the day, whereas moon square Uranus, yes, it does create some instability and could turn things upside down if we do the wrong thing. With moon square Uranus, maybe we have to look for trouble. And so if we make a special effort to avoid trouble, and if we try to focus on the moon sextile sun, maybe we can have a high degree of harmony. But still, we can't deny the fact that the moon is square Uranus, and so some of us may be a little bit impatient. We want results. We also want attention, some of us. Moon in Leo, and if we don't get attention, then moon square Uranus, we can feel we have to do something to attract attention. And at worst, we can do something annoying just so people notice, so people sit up and listen. So that can be how moon square Uranus works, or not us necessarily doing something annoying, but perhaps someone else doing something annoying. Now, those are the lunar aspects. There are some other aspects which are really quite strong, like Mercury semi-square Mars. There's Mercury, 45-degree aspect from Mars. Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto. So there's Mercury, there's Pluto up there, Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto, and Mars square Pluto. So Mercury, Mars and Pluto are all linked up with each other, and that might be some cause for concern. Let me just show you this on the 90-degree dial, just to show you what I mean. Because we might not immediately see the linkage between the two. Remember, 90-degree dial, conjunctions, squares, and oppositions all become conjunctions, semi-squares and sesquiquadrates become oppositions. So there is... let's put the dial on. Can you see there's Mercury, and there's that Mars-Pluto square. Remember, it's in the 90-degree dial, it's shown as a conjunction. And there you can see Mercury opposition Mercury-Mars, Mars-Pluto on the 90-degree dial. So that opposition is actually a semi-square. So that's showing you, the 90-degree dial, showing you this configuration, is how this configuration is working. So with this aspect, many of us just might feel that something has to give. There's something we want to communicate, and we might feel that we're under pressure. Mars, Pluto wants results. It's quite into its own power, and Mercury, semi-squaring or sesquiquadrating Mars and Pluto, can really push us into, I don't know, saying things, trying to manipulate. There could be a certain sense of propaganda here, using the force of our personality and the force of our words to get things done. And I suppose, it's a very political atmosphere we're in. We're sort of elections all over the place. And I suppose we can imagine politicians desperately trying to assert themselves, desperately trying to push out the opposite, push out the other party, and a lot of polemic with this aspect. So it could be quite stressful. So as individuals, I think what we have to do is just remember, however difficult or stressful things might be, to just remember that there is a sextile between the moon and the sun. Moon in Leo, sextile the sun in Gemini. Sun and the moon, the lights, that they're in fortunate aspect. So regardless of what Pluto and Mars and Mercury are doing, that moon sextile sun can provide us with some basic stability and inner harmony. Turning to the heliocentric picture, we see that we now have a pretty close conjunction between Mars and Neptune. So this heliocentric conjunction between Mars and Neptune has been building up, and now it's exact. And with Mars conjunct Neptune, may say something about the sea, water, plumbing, anything to do with water and the sea. We need to be careful. In a global sense, things to do with water, sea, oceans, shipping, could present a few problems. And notice also that Venus is starting to make this square to Mars and Neptune. So that's sort of triggering it. In a day or two's time, Venus will be making the exact square to Neptune. And that's just going to trigger this whole aspect. So as far as we're concerned, be careful with water and plumbing and things like that, and be careful about inappropriately expressing ourselves, thinking that we need to assert ourselves in one particular direction, and in fact it's a direction that is just wrong, is just not going to work, has little hope of fruition, and we might just have a sense of delusion. So delusion leads to an inappropriate use of our power. Though many of us are going to want things to be better. The heliocentric Jupiter trine Pluto, I've been talking about this over the last couple of days, and it is getting stronger. Jupiter is now at 0 degrees 27 Gemini, and Pluto is at 0 degrees 40 Aquarius. So over the next couple of days, the Jupiter-Pluto heliocentric trine is going to become exact. And this is a time when we should not be satisfied with second best. We could always do better. So what we perhaps have to do is use the planetary energy to give ourselves a boost. And now, having looked at the heliocentric picture, I want to look at the astrology from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, June the 11th, 2024. Aries, you're really in quite a good position. I think, Aries, over the last couple of days, you might not have fully been yourself. I think maybe you were just getting used to the fact that Mars had changed sign. Mars is ruler of Aries. You've had Mars in Aries for a long time, and then it just then it moved into Taurus. There was a sudden deceleration there. Having to slow down quickly. That might have been a shock. And things that were moving quickly have now just come to almost a halt, or at least that's how it felt to begin with. You had to assert yourself in different ways. Mars moving out of a fire sign, it was all very familiar in a fire sign, but you move Mars into an earth sign, you have to deal with the material world, and it's slow. Everything slows down, and that's perhaps not what Aries wanted, at least to begin with. But I think you're now getting used to it, and perhaps you're realizing that it's actually easier this way. There is less pressure on you, and at the same time, you still have a lot of freedom. In fact, you could say that you've got more freedom. At first, it didn't feel like that, because you felt things weren't moving fast enough. And I suppose some Arians might take the view that speed is freedom, but it's not really freedom, because when everything's happening at 100 miles an hour, you have this pressure to keep doing things, and it can be exhausting. But now you can be yourself, and I think that you really appreciate having the moon in Leo. So yeah, I know that yesterday the moon was in Leo, but it wasn't really doing much. It wasn't really applying to much. But now the moon is in Leo, it's making a sextile to the sun, and you're feeling that there's a certain sense of harmony. And sun in Gemini gives you an opportunity to think about what you're doing, and also to talk to people in a down-to-earth kind of way. And I think that people will appreciate that. When I say down to earth, of course, I don't mean boring, because, the sun is in Gemini, but it's a time where words and actions can nicely balance each other. And at the same time, I think that you're going to be pretty creative. You can do things in your own way. And because things aren't moving so quickly, you can take the time to be creative. Because, if things are moving very fast, it's really difficult to be creative, because you're just constantly moving from one thing to another, and you don't get a chance to work out what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, what works, what doesn't work. But now you've got that time, so really make the most of it. And that moon in Leo is also making a trine to Charon. Remember, Charon, that minor planet, is actually a comet. With that moon trine Chiron, I would have said that it's not really in this instance about the wounded healer, but it's more about you being able to do something that is different. I think this moon trine Chiron is more about you, the maverick, rather than you, the wounded healer. It's about doing things that are different, maybe are at odds with the rest of society. And because you're not in the spotlight, you're not going to be getting criticism if you do something which is a little bit strange and offbeat. And the moon is also, in addition, it's making a sextile to Venus. And so with the moon sextile Venus, I think that is great for relationships, getting on with people. It's not a very emotional sextile. Moon is in Leo, a fire sign. Venus is in Gemini, an air sign. So it's not an emotional sextile. It's more about just getting on with people on a mental and a verbal and perhaps inspirational level. New ties with people, and just finding common ground, finding things to discuss and talk about which emphasize your similarities rather than your differences. Now, I don't want to entirely give the impression that everything is sweetness and light, because there are two aspects that need to be considered. Mars is your ruler, it's square Pluto, and Mercury is semi-square Mars. So Mars square Pluto, despite everything I've said, you are, or not, maybe not all of you, maybe not every Aries listening to this is concerned about this, but with Mars square Pluto, there could be issues of power today. You might be just concerned, how much power do you have relative to other people, Mars square Pluto? Are you able to assert this power? And if you're not able to assert this power, what should you be doing? And with Mercury semi-square Mars, Mercury is the communication planet. Now, there is, in a general sense, plenty of scope for having harmonious communication with people. Just relaxed communication about nothing in particular. That's Moon sextile Sun. But Mercury is semi-square Mars. So, if you feel that you're not being taken seriously, or you feel you need to push your point, yeah, you can. Mercury semi-square Mars. You can say something quite dramatic, and people will sit up and listen, but they might be upset. You have this power, but are you going to actually use this power? I think you have to be very sparing in the way you use it. Yes, you can force your way through the power of your words, but in most cases, it's probably unnecessary. And so, Aries, I suppose you have to consider who you are. Obviously, you're not Emmanuel Macron, because Emmanuel Macron is a Sagittarius. But if you're someone who is a power broker and power is important to you, then, yeah, there may be times when you do have to use your words to change things, to get people to sit up and listen, when you don't really care who you offend. But maybe for most Arians, it's not important, but it's still something you do need to consider. Taurus, things are looking relatively good because the moon is making a sextile to Venus. So moon sextile Venus is relatively harmonious. Remember, the moon is also making a sextile to the sun, and I think that your relationship with the rest of the world is perhaps more harmonious than usual, and you know how to make yourself and others feel comfortable. And I don't think there's necessarily anything that you actually have to do. It may be enough just to be yourself, perhaps spend time with people you know well. Because if you spend time with people you know well, there are no complications. You don't really have to think things through. And I suppose it's in some ways you're not really in the mood for surprises. You just want to be comfortable, and you want to feel a certain sense of warmth from others, and I think that is certainly something that you can create. And also, in a social sense, you're going to be able to quietly make progress. Not make progress in a dramatic way, but when you are interacting with people, you can bring to bear a certain sense of hope and optimism, which many people are going to appreciate. Yet, one can't avoid the fact that Mars is making a square aspect to Pluto. And this square aspect is exact today. I did talk about this square aspect yesterday, but it's now exact. And I think this square aspect is important to you because Mars is in Taurus and Pluto is in Aquarius. Aquarius is a high-profile sector of your chart, and with this Mars-Pluto square, many Taurians are going to want to assert themselves. They're going to want to make progress. I don't mean make progress in some vague way, progress which is very single-minded. So if you've got an ambition, particularly a short-term ambition, you're going to want to throw everything you've got into achieving it. And if anyone is in your way, you might want to really push things hard. And once Taurus decides it wants something, it really can get something. Especially with Mars in Taurus. When I was looking at Mars in Taurus and what it means to have Mars in Taurus, it's all about being single-minded. And okay, you may or may not have Mars in Taurus. Probably don't have Mars in Taurus, but the point is Mars is in Taurus. It is in your sign, and it is square Pluto. So you're able to focus vast amounts of resources onto getting what you want. Be patient, though. Mars is in a fixed sign, Taurus, and Pluto is in a fixed sign, Aquarius. So it's not a time when you should be thinking about, oh, I'm going to get it now in 5 minutes' time. Think about the longer term. Think about the next few weeks. What can you achieve in the next few weeks? Just slowly but surely push it. And I think you will get good results. Though, do be careful what you say, because Mercury is aspecting Mars, and Mercury is, by semi-square, Mercury is also making a sesquiquadrate to Pluto. So there's a certain danger there that you do become a little bit impatient and frustrated over the course of the day. And you just might say something you didn't really mean to say it, or you didn't think there'd be much of a reaction. But it's just something very blunt, down to earth, that misses out on some of the subtleties, and that could spoil everything. So be careful what you say, because Taurians can be blunt. They can say things which just spoil the magic. Everyone is relaxing, being happy, then Taurus says something just crass, down to earth, but just inappropriate, and just spoils everything. So don't fall into that trap. I'm not saying that there's nothing that needs to be said. It may be necessary. If you feel everyone is being complacent, that nothing is happening, that something needs to happen right now, and time is of the essence, then sure, you can say something that gets people's attention. They might not like you for saying what you want to say, but at least you'll have an impact. Gemini, you have the opportunity to speak your mind, I think. The words are flowing, and I think that you'll know what to say without having to think about it too much, and you will understand the basic inner harmony of your environment. And so because you have an understanding of this harmony, I think that most Geminis will just respect that, and they will understand their limits. And you can also do things which make you popular, and can also bring new people into your circle of friends, into your broad network, your social network. Maybe it's a network on social media. You can bring more people in because as I've just said, you know what to say, and I think that this makes it easy, and it can be an easy day. I mean, that doesn't mean to say it has to be an easy day. It really depends what you want to concentrate on. I think for most Geminis, they probably want to concentrate on the fact that the moon is making a sextile to the sun. That is all about harmony. Moon is actually making a sextile to Mercury as well. Okay, that's more the beginning of the day, more if you're in East Asia, Australia, New Zealand, but I think all of us to some extent will feel this moon sextile Mercury. And it's about being able to freely communicate without having any pressure. It's not really the words that matter. It's just people enjoying each other's company, and it would actually be a great time for making some kind of short journey, making a sudden appearance somewhere you want to go to, that doesn't really take much effort. I'm not talking about 2 hours in the car. I'm talking about a quick few minute visit, just an appearance. When you're actually there, it makes a difference, I think. One spends a lot of time talking to people on the phone or on the internet, but actually being there in person could really help smooth things along. And so perhaps you need to make an effort to talk to people around you in your immediate environment. It will be appreciated. And again, it's not the words that you say that matter. It's just gentle communication. If you're one of these Geminis, for example, that's good at small talk, then that would be great. Me, I'm useless at small talk, so that doesn't really apply to me. But some Geminis actually are very good at small talk. Now, what I've given you here is a possibility. There are other things to consider which may be more serious. And if we look at the position of Mercury, Mercury's in Gemini, it is also semi-square Mars, and it is sesquiquadrate Pluto. So Mercury can have the essence of Mars and the essence of Pluto. It does depend on your situation and who you are and what you're trying to achieve. But with Mercury semi-square Mars, if need be, you are able to communicate with, I was going to say great violence. I don't mean real violence, but communicate with force. That's something you can do. If something isn't going right, you are able to communicate with great force. And Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto, you can, if need be extremely manipulative. You know what to say to get a reaction. You know what to say to get people to really focus on you and your needs. Is that important? I don't know. Do you need to be manipulative? Depends what you're doing. But I suppose you also have to sort of monitor your state of mind today, because if Mercury is semi-square Mars and Mercury is sesquiquadrate Pluto, some Geminis may feel a certain sense of tension, that something is building up, that you somehow need to assert yourself and you just cannot hold on. And in that case, I suppose you'll have no choice. You will have to tell people what's on your mind, and you'll have to be very clear about your likes and dislikes. Though maybe we need to bring this all together. Yes, there could be, for some Geminis, a lot of inattention, a desire perhaps to communicate in a way which is almost rather brutal. On the other hand, Moon in Leo, sextile the Sun in Gemini. And that sextile may be about presentation. Yes, you've got powerful thoughts, things you want to happen, things that are making you nervous. That's the inner you. But Moon sextile Sun is the way you present it. It's almost like, what do they call it, the user interface. And so that means that you can put a sort of a harmonious mask on the whole thing. And that means that if you keep your cool, even if you're not feeling cool, very particularly cool, you can get your way, at least verbally and in terms of arguments, without causing offence. Cancer. Moon continues moving through Leo. Remember, moon is your ruler. So in moon in Leo, I suppose, does have a fairly high opinion of itself. I mean, moon in Cancer, that you do take yourself seriously. Okay, I know you're not a Leo. Obviously, you're not a Leo. But Cancer is a serious sign. And so with moon in Leo, you do have a certain seriousness today. And you understand that certain things are serious, need to be taken seriously. I don't know, for example, money. Money matters, and today you want to make sure that you're in control of your finances. Like yesterday. Yesterday the moon was in Leo. Yesterday you may have felt that you knew what was important, but you didn't quite know how to apply yourself. But today it's kind of easier to apply yourself because the moon is sextile the sun. I think you feel more supported, not necessarily by other people, but just by yourself and your surroundings. It just feels that you've got some level of comfort, and that perhaps allows you to push forward with your agenda. Okay, if you've got an agenda. Also, moon sextile Venus, you can get on with people, I think, pretty well, particularly in a low profile setting. If you want to get on with people, you need to be away from the madding crowds. You don't want to be in the limelight, just you and someone else saying something, talking, discussing things. That's easy. If there are lots of people around, it's different. Then you get nervous. I mean, after all, the moon is square Uranus. Moon square Uranus can be about drama, wanting attention in a sort of frantic way, things happening that you weren't really expecting and didn't really desire, but I don't know, something has to be forced. And that's more likely to happen if you're surrounded by people in a high pressure situation. Then that moon square Uranus could start to manifest. And I don't think that would be particularly positive. If, Leo, you are working today, I don't know what you do. Maybe you're not working. Depends on you. But if Cancer, did I say Leo? Cancer. If Cancer, you are working today, then don't feel that you have to do things by the book. There are expectations for sure, but it might be a good idea to do things in a way that is slightly different, that demonstrates your personality and your unique way of doing things. It might feel a bit risky, but I don't think there'll be any problems. I think people need a different approach, and by demonstrating your individuality, I think you'll also be showing how indispensable you are, and I think that people will really appreciate that. Leo, like yesterday, the moon is moving through your sign, and I would have said in some respects the moon is in quite a good position. It's in late Leo. I think certainly at the moment late Leo is sort of more interesting than early Leo, and the moon is not just in Leo, but it is sextile the sun, and moon sextile sun gives you a certain sense of togetherness, warmth, gives you sociability. There are people there who will enjoy your company. Though I do understand that you may have some reservations. I think many Leos will. You might be slightly self-conscious. You might feel that, people aren't really interested in you. They won't appreciate you. You won't get the feedback you're looking for. I think these are your own inner views, and these inner views are not necessarily a representation of the truth. So, Leo, I think it's important that you're not too self-conscious. Just, just be yourself and tell yourself that people like you, people want to hear from you, and I just think that your social life can be certainly more useful and more fun than it was yesterday. Now, I'm not saying that everyone is going to be useful. In certain situations, there could be a power struggle because Mars is square Pluto. And, Pluto's in your opposite sign of Aquarius. You perhaps know that. It's been there for some time. Yeah, it's retrograde in Aquarius. And Mars is making it square to Pluto. And Mars in Taurus. Taurus is a pretty high-profile sector for Leo. And so Mars in Taurus might be about you having ambitions, wanting things to happen. But the square Pluto is about you realizing that there are things, people and situations holding you back or who appear to be holding you back. And you have to work out whether or not it's your imagination. So don't make accusations, for example, unless you've really thought it through. And be realistic. And if you feel that someone is holding you back, prepare to do some investigation. Ask yourself, is this really true? Or are you being held back by yourself, by your own doubts and your own reservations? Because you could say, but if you are 100% sure of yourself, you know you're in the right, you know you're doing the right thing, then no one can hold you back. But if you have doubts, then sure, it's easy for someone to hold you back because the someone holding you back is feeding onto your own doubts. So I think you have to be realistic there, and you do have to be honest with yourself. But I'm not saying that you have to deal with these complications. I think that when I'm talking to the 12 signs, in many cases, there is an option with today. You can have a complicated day, or you can have a simple day. Complicated day, sure, you can have that if you want. Why would you want to have a complicated day? Well, because maybe if you have a complicated day, you can get more results. There's more opportunity in a complicated day. If you have a simple day, then everything's nice and easy, but your opportunities are fewer and they're not so available. So in a sense, it's up to you. But this doesn't take away from the point that the moon is sextile the sun. And so, Leo, I think you're going to feel a great sense of inner harmony. Even if there are things that are disharmonious out there, and that should guide you, and that this should be your basic principle. You can be at one with the world. And even if things do get complicated, I'm confident that you can manage. Virgo, you don't have to be out there getting all the attention today. It really isn't necessary. And it might not even be desirable. There are some things, Virgo, which are probably best done on your own. You understand, broadly speaking, what needs to be done and how things need to be put together, and you don't really need anyone's help. And there may be times today when you alternate. So one moment you're out there dealing with people, the next moment you've disappeared. because perhaps something needs to be thought through, or you just maybe just feel you need a break. No pressure. And then when you're ready, you go back. So there's no need to take too much, especially in a social sense. Every now and then you just need to recharge your batteries. And your power, I think, is within yourself. And during periods of isolation, you're arguably at your strongest, and you're working out what needs to be done, and you're developing yourself as an individual. It's very difficult to be an individual when you are in the limelight. I mean, I think this is perhaps why, for example, celebrities, you think about celebrities. Celebrities are supposed to be individuals, aren't they? But really, for most celebrities, the definition of being a celebrity is someone who can fit into what society wants. And you're not in the mood for completely fitting in, are you? Not really. And if you're not in the mood for fitting in, you want to be out of the limelight. And so you need time to work out what is your individual approach. And once you've worked out your individual approach, then you can start bringing it to bear on, whatever you're trying to achieve. And for example, if you're trying to be successful at work or in business, you will be presenting a plan or an idea that has already been worked out, or is in the process of being worked out. But the working out is happening when you are alone or with people you trust. And at the same time, we've got the moon. Okay, it's moving away from a sextile of Mercury. Mercury is your ruler, remember. So the sextile between Moon and Mercury is very much about the beginning of the day, and it's going to be stronger if you're in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, particularly East Asia. But still, that moon sextile Mercury, and the moon is sextiling the Sun, and it's sextiling the Venus, does allow you to communicate pretty well. And I think the secret of your communication will be the fact that you're able to listen, and you're not going to be pushing your agenda out in a direct way. You'll be able to have moments of quiet, and in those moments of quiet, you can understand the other person. Though, having said all that, we cannot deny the fact that Mercury is your ruler. And Mercury is semi-square Mars, and it is sesquiquadrate Pluto. So I think, Virgo, there are things bothering you. There are things that you regard as being important. You may even be obsessing about them. Mercury, sesquiquadrate Pluto, can obsess. And so perhaps, Virgo, you have to consider, what are you obsessing about? What is really important to you? What is it? And you may not be able to stop thinking about it. Now, what do you do in that situation? I mean, I could say, well, just stop thinking about it, just relax. But it may be that you have to bring it out into the open. I've just said that you need to keep things fairly quiet and secret, but that's good if you're doing useful work. If you are on your own and you are obsessing, Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto, that could happen. In that situation, then you perhaps need a different approach. In order to stop obsessing, you maybe need to find a solution. Maybe it's about information, something you need to find out, and you need to put your mind to rest. Because, if you spend too much time obsessing, well, you could waste a lot of time. But I don't want to overstate that Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto. The moon is moving through through late Leo. Um, and, it is going to move into Virgo at some stage today. It's going to move into your sign. In fact, if you're on the West Coast, or Hawaii, Alaska, obviously California, Oregon, British Columbia, Washington State, the moon does actually move into Virgo, into your sign, late in the day, very late in the day, 10:39 p.m. Los Angeles time. And so if you're up late tonight and you're on the West Coast, well, then there might be a sudden change, and you might actually have a sudden opportunity, an opportunity that comes from nowhere. So for example, Californian Virgoan night owls might have an opportunity, but maybe you'll just want to go to sleep. And anyway, it's an optional extra. So that's it, Virgo. I just think it can be quite a useful day, and yeah, try not to obsess. I just don't think it's worth it. Libra. I think, Libra, that things are getting better. Venus has been, very close to the Sun recently, and over the weekend we had Venus square Saturn, and you might have been feeling this, but things do seem to be improving. You're feeling that there is more space and that there is less pressure on you. And today you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is making a sextile to Venus. Venus is your ruler, moon is sextile Venus, and I think that means that there is going to be scope for relaxation, and you're going to be helped also by the fact that the moon is sextile the sun. And I think that your social environment is going to be easier than usual. There's going to be more comfort, and I think other people are probably going to be more trustworthy and more sympathetic to your needs. And also from a social perspective, I think you'll be very good today at making friends, making new contacts. So if you feel that you're alone or that you don't know enough people, there are definitely things you can do. You just have to be positive and enthusiastic. And I think you're going to find that other people are going to respond very well to that. And so don't limit yourself. There are many opportunities, particularly in terms of gaining new knowledge, not just new friends, but new knowledge. There's something new you want to look at, and something perhaps new you want to understand, and a different perspective. It's all there. It's all possible. And at the same time, I think, Libra, you're going to be able to tune into your hopes for the future. What do you want? Ask yourself what you want, not what other people want, but what do you want? And if you ask that question, you'll fairly immediately come up with answers. Now, you might then think, okay, I know what I want, but how can I make it happen? Well, don't worry about that in the first instance. Although I should say that Jupiter is trine Pluto. Now, Jupiter's been trine Pluto for a bit of time, but let's just remember, Jupiter is in Gemini, Pluto is in Aquarius. So those are two air signs. What's the other air sign? What's the third air sign? Of course, the third air sign is Libra. And this Jupiter-Pluto geocentric trine is becoming exact again heliocentrically, because heliocentrically, over the next couple of days, we've got an exact Jupiter-Pluto trine. And this is all about making things better for yourself. And do take advantage of this. So if you start to have hopes for the future, things that you'd like to be, and you might be thinking, oh, how can this possibly be? Well, remember, there's a Jupiter trine Pluto. That Jupiter trine Pluto can make things happen for you. Yeah, sure, it requires some effort, but not too much effort, or at least not an impossible amount of effort. You've got the energy to do it. because, you are part of the cosmos, and Jupiter is trine Pluto, and that Jupiter trine Pluto has a direct impact on Libra, and you are a Libra, so it's got to be possible. That absolutely has to be the case. Now, one thing I should point out, though, is that Mars is making a square to Pluto, and that may be relevant because Mars rules Aries, and Aries is your opposite sign. And so Mars square Pluto may represent another person who is pushing their weight around, who wants to get things done, who may be quite selfish. And you perhaps have to consider, who is this person? Is there someone out there who is being unreasonable, is only thinking about themselves and their interests? If such a person is around, is raging around, then ask yourself how you're going to deal with the situation. As a Libran, it might feel easiest to just compromise. If someone is desperate for something, they really want it, they're obsessed with their own power, and maybe it's easiest to give it to them. Not necessarily. You have to go back to your hopes for the future. What do you want for yourself? And so when you consider what you want for yourself, you should always make a comparison between that and the demands and pressures being placed upon you. And if you are being pressurized into making decisions and taking actions which are at odds with your hopes for the future, then I think that is a situation where you have to act in a selfish way. You've got to put your own interests first. Sometimes that can be difficult for Librans, but I think that today that is the right approach. But I don't think you need to be dramatic about it. The moon is sextile. The moon is making a sextile to the sun. It's all about harmony, and I think that you can get your way in a way that is harmonious and clever and doesn't lead to big arguments. Scorpio. Well, I was just talking to Libra, and I was mentioning to Libra that there is a square aspect between Mars and Pluto, and this Mars-Pluto square is important for you, I think, because you're a Scorpio and Mars is your ruler and Mars is square Pluto. So what that means, Scorpio, is that I think that there are going to be things that you really want. There's a strong sense of ambition, and it's an ambition that in some respects could be quite obsessive, because there is an issue of how much power you have. And maybe, Scorpio, it's not just about what you want in the end, it's about how much control you have. And I know that Scorpios have a certain reputation for being really into control and power, but I think that stereotypical view of the Scorpio may actually be true today. You do want to be in control with Mars square Pluto. And if you can't get your way, then it seems that you may feel that you have to get your way. What does it take? With Scorpio, you could say, well, whatever it takes means justify the end. Well, I think you have to be careful. If you push things too far in a single-minded way, you could cause a lot of damage. And so, Scorpio, I suppose what you have to think about is, okay, what do you want? Number one, what is stopping you getting what you want? Realistically, are the things stopping you getting what you want, the things in your way, are they external or are they internal? Internally, it just could be your own psychology, it could be your own imagination, it could be your own fears. then there's the external blocks. They may be real, maybe people, maybe situations. And how do you actually deal with it? So if there's a roadblock, is it really necessary to get a bulldozer to clear the roadblock? Maybe you can take a sideways approach. Maybe there's some kind of path where you don't confront the block, you just go round it. And I think that would probably be best. With this Mars square Pluto, you don't want to have direct confrontation. I don't think direct confrontation is actually going to work today. Or if it does work, the damage is just simply not going to be worth it. It could just be really grinding. And, again, Mars square Pluto, it's in fixed signs. Mars is in Taurus, fixed. Pluto is in Aquarius, fixed. Difficult to make progress. And also, Mercury is semi-square Mars. Mercury is about communication. Mercury is also sesquiquadrate Pluto. So there's a possibility that you say things just out of irritation. This thing is in my way. I want my way. Get out of my way. That could be a certain temptation for Scorpios. And I think that you should resist that temptation or at least try other approaches. I mean, look at the moon. The moon is in Leo. It's sextile the sun. I've talked about this moon sextile sun quite a lot. It's a harmonious aspect. The moon is actually also sextile Venus. Venus represents the other. And with those sextiles, it seems that in many cases, Scorpios can present themselves to the wider world and they can get attention and they're not going to attract conflict, and people will, in many cases, just get out of your way without any fuss. And also, don't underestimate your diplomatic skills. Now, I know that Mars square Pluto is not very diplomatic, but okay, that's one aspect of what's happening today. Moon sextile, the sun, can be diplomatic. It's about you as a sensitive Scorpio knowing how to deal with people, being able to sort of perhaps get inside their psychology and knowing what they want to hear, perhaps giving a little bit away, a little bit of compromise, but nonetheless being able to smooth things over and also making people feel good about themselves. Moon is in Leo. If you can make people feel good about themselves, then that's half the battle, isn't it? And matters are helped even more by the fact that the moon is moving to Regulus, the royal star. That is about success. That is about getting attention. And I know that Scorpio has a reputation for being low profile, but you do want some attention today, I think. And if you behave correctly, I do think, Scorpio, you can get this attention, and this attention will be entirely favourable. Sagittarius, you are able, if you want, to assert great power. If power matters to you, and I think that people will listen. You've got to choose your time and battle very carefully. You can't just assert yourself just for the sake of it, just when you want. You have to make the right choices. But I think that if you feel that people need to listen, then I think they will listen, and overall that does put you in a strong position. And I think you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is making a sextile to the sun. And the moon is in Leo, it's in a fire sign, and it's sextile the sun. I think that you're able to express yourself very well, and at the same time, I think you can actually be quite interesting. Some people are a bit bored. life goes on, they need some excitement, and Sagittarius might be just the person to provide excitement. So if you want to get someone's attention and if you want to get their cooperation, try to motivate them. Try to say something that they find interesting. Because once you've got their interest, then they're all ears. So perhaps you just have to sort of tempt them by saying something that's interesting, that piques their curiosity, and just the rest should just flow very easily. And so maybe it's about your past experiences. Maybe you have an experience, something you did in the past that maybe you haven't talked about, but maybe now you want to talk about it. Maybe it's about telling people something about yourself that they don't know. Now, of course, you've got to be careful what things you say about yourself. Just because, I don't know, you spent 10 years in prison because you've robbed a bank. I'm not really talking about that, for example, but just some aspect of your biography that is not known. You start talking about it and people will be really interested. Wow, you did that. And once you've got their attention, once you've attracted their curiosity, then you can shift things and start to perhaps manipulate the situation, and things can start to go your way. And so, you are that breath of fresh air. You are that sense of excitement that people are looking for. And maybe also, some people, they're just doing the same old boring routines and they're getting a bit sick of it. And you just change it. And you just provide, at the very least, a distraction. And that's how it all starts, as a distraction. You provide for distraction, and then it's up to you how you're able to build on that distraction. Now, turning to the specifics of one-to-one relationships, Mercury is semi-square Mars, and Mercury is sesquiquadrate Pluto. So Mercury represents the other. So, at the moment, Mercury is in Gemini. So Mercury represents the important people in your life. Not so much the group, we're talking about more on a one-to-one level. Mercury is being in Gemini is actually quite strongly placed in Gemini. And that Mercury in Gemini can be someone who is not just well placed, but is actually able to be manipulative. I talked perhaps about you being manipulative, but certain people can manipulate you, and they can say things and do things that you find it difficult to keep track of, and in the end, perhaps the manipulator becomes the manipulated. And so in one-to-one situations, observe the interplay. It's quite complicated, actually, and I think that in most cases, if you're really close to someone, I think in most cases it will be them calling the shots, them doing things that they want to do. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. You do have to consider the situation. So in terms of the power equation, people you don't know very well, the group, I think you tend to have the power. But if you know someone really well, if you're really close to them one-to-one, then I think it may be them having the power. But as I said, I don't think that's necessarily a problem. Capricorn, you are making it very clear at the moment what you want. Clearly, you have strong needs, strong desires, and these are things that you want to express. And I think you expect to be taken seriously. Now, this doesn't perhaps sound typically Capricorn. Capricorns can, be quite modest. They don't, like to draw attention to themselves. But I don't think you should be in denial, Capricorn, about your need for attention. Attention does matter, and it's important that you're noticed. And today, I think that you can be noticed, and you have to be clear. That's the main thing. You have to be clear, saying it how it is. You may not feel that you want to say it how it is. Maybe you'll assume that other people have the imagination and the subtlety to understand what you want, but I don't think that's an assumption you can make. I think you just have to make things clear and straightforward. And if things are clear and straightforward, I think then people are going to pay attention to you. And it works both ways. You need to be clear and straightforward, and I think you need to expect other people to be clear and straightforward. I think that there are some people who somehow finding it difficult to tell you what's on their mind. They don't want to say. At least that's their first reaction. Maybe they're afraid of you. Maybe they don't know how you're going to respond. But I think that you are quite a stabilizing influence today. And so if someone is unsure of themselves, then you can provide some provide some stability and security to them, and perhaps they just don't understand what's going on, and you need to make things simple. And I think that today Capricorns can make things simple, and that's just really important. So if there are complications, dealing with complicated instructions, make sure just everyone understands, and don't assume that people get it. I mean, that particularly applies if you're in a position of authority, whether it's at home or at work, whether in your social life, if people are looking up to you, if you're the one who usually exercise leadership, then people may not actually understand what you expect of them. So it may be a situation where they're quite happy to do what they're told, absolutely happy to do what they're told, but they might appear not to do what they're told because they don't understand what they're supposed to be doing. So your job, Capricorn, is to make sure that they do understand what they're supposed to be doing. And when you're explaining something, you just must make sure that they are listening. Some people just don't listen. I mean, not because they're being rude, they just are not listening. They're thinking about something else, or maybe you're telling them too much at once. But once everyone understands what's going on, then I do think that, things are going to be much easier. And I should also say, Capricorn, that it's not just about other people and the people you have to deal with. It's also about you. And I mean, in some respects, Capricorn, the most important work today is going to be done, I think, on your own terms at least, where it doesn't matter what people do or what people don't do. It's all about you making the decisions. And it's about you deciding what's important for yourself and putting all your energy into it. And maybe just not even being bothered by what other people are doing. Just focusing on just one thing with everything you've got and seeing some quite amazing results. That is possible. I mean, they might not seem amazing at the time, but if you keep going in one direction, in one activity, then it's almost inevitable, particularly with that Capricorn focus, it's inevitable but you're going to get results. And so that perhaps is how you should manage the day. Put yourself first, and don't worry too much about whether people understand what you're talking about, whether people are following instructions. Though if people need to follow instructions, as I said in this piece for the Capricorn, you just have to make it very clear what they need to do. I think they'll understand if you present yourself in the right way. Aquarius. There does continue to be a certain emphasis on other people. I mean, it can't really be avoided. After all, the moon is in Leo. Leo is your opposite sign. Now, I talked about moon in Leo yesterday, and I was saying that Aquarius, you understood that people were important, but at the same time, you weren't quite sure what to do about it. It's almost like you had to be on standby. But I think today things are starting to come together. The moon is making a sextile to the sun. It's making a sextile to Venus, and I think that these aspects are going to be quite fun, actually. You can enjoy yourself with other people's company. And so maybe you need to choose the right company. Yeah, sure, there are certain people who are tedious, who are not useful, they're going to just drag you down. But there are other people who are amusing and they're fun, and if you spend time with them, I think that you'll not just be able to enjoy yourself, but I think that you'll also find that your creativity and individuality are supported, and that really does matter. As an Aquarius, you understand that you are special. I mean, I know that we're all special, but Aquarius is particularly special, perhaps at the moment because Pluto is in Aquarius, and we often get these these sort of reflex actions across the signs. So with Aquarius, we get this idea that Aquarius is a very detached sign. Perhaps it's able to not be completely focused on itself, but is able to look at the sort of broad societal context. Yes, but the opposite sign for Aquarius is Leo. And perhaps in every Aquarius, there is a Leo trying to get out, especially with the moon in Leo. And that's where, obviously the moon is in Leo at the moment. And so there is that inner Leo perhaps trying to get out. And having a sense of specialness today is important, and whether you like it or not, I think that you are trying to defend that specialness. And is that a good thing? Well, it could be a problem if it's taken too far. You might just refuse to compromise. You might refuse to see other points of view, which would be a shame. As I've just said at the beginning, when I was talking about what's going on with your sign, I think that you can really benefit from other people. Other people can be very supportive. But some Aquarians might be so into themselves and their specialness, about the inner Leo popping out, that that has a damaging influence on your social ties. So don't be too stubborn. And however special you are, well, in fact, if you're really special, then your specialness doesn't have to be defended because it's just there. And that just needs to be accepted. And you don't want to just use too much energy to defend something that doesn't really have to be defended. Though I suppose, Aquarius, today there may be certain points of principle which you refuse to compromise. Aquarians do have strong principles, and there may be something happening that is at odds with these principles. Maybe someone is behaving in a way that is not right, or you see something going on in society that is that makes you annoyed. In that case, I suppose you have to be firm and you have to hold to what you believe in. So that's okay. But I suppose even when you're trying to hold firm, or particularly when you're trying to hold firm to what you believe in, no one may understand what's going on unless you talk about it. And perhaps that's what needs to happen. You need to talk about your beliefs and what you like and what you don't like and what annoys you. And you might think that nobody cares, but actually they do care. If you're honest about the way you see the world, if you're honest about why you're special, then I think people will listen, and I think you're going to get good feedback, and blockages will get removed, and in the end, the day will really start to flow. So to an extent, it's up to you. And Aquarius, be special, but don't be too special. Pisces, you still are in the mood where you like things to be done, or you want things to be done in a particular way. That does matter to you. And you know, we've had Saturn in your sign for well over a year now, and since March of 2023, since March of 2023, you have become a lot more focused, and you've basically developed a much better idea of what you like and what you don't like. And today, you do feel that things need to be done in one way. You're not really in the mood for looking at alternatives. But I think you should be looking for alternatives. I think that your broad strategy is right, and your broad idea about the way things should be organized is correct. But there are certain details which need to be explored, because you may not be going about things in entirely the right way. Just a few changes, maybe just administrative changes, could make all the difference. So it's just very important that you're not stubborn. Stubbornness will get you nowhere. And I know you could be stubborn. I mean, Moon is square Uranus. You may get annoyed if alternative approaches are suggested to you, for example. But why should you be annoyed? Is it too much effort to consider doing things a different way? You should not regard it as being too much effort to do things a different way, because it can actually be very useful and actually save you a lot of time. And at the same, while this is going on, don't underestimate your own power. I think over the last few weeks, actually, Pisceans have been quite powerful. And they have actually had the ability to change things quickly. And right now, you do have this ability. If things are not right, you can just make them right, you can force them right, and you can actually force people to pay attention to you. And you can present information that people don't know. And you can just present it in a dramatic way. People are just not going to be ready for it. You just come in and just say, by the way, did you know that it's like this, this, and this? Did you know that? And people will say, no, I didn't know that at all. I'm really shocked. And then you say, well, okay. Make adjustments because of that information. So when you present information it does have a big impact, and you can force people to change track. Again, if necessary. You don't have to use that kind of force if it's unnecessary. If everything is running smoothly, then there's nothing that needs to be said. Now, turning to relationships, we cannot ignore the fact that Mercury is semi-square Mars and Mercury is sesquiquadrate Pluto. Now, with Mercury semi-square Mars, I just said that you're able to present information to people in a dramatic way and get them to change track. But certain people are also able to be dramatic, particularly people you know well. Perhaps partners, spouses, Mars, because Mercury is semi-square Mars and Mercury is sesquiquadrate Pluto. Mercury is actually in quite a powerful position because of that. People who know you well are in a powerful position. They can say things which have an immediate impact. And with Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto, you can be persuaded by the right person. A person who knows you well is going to find it relatively easy to persuade you to do things and think things. Now, I don't know whether or not that's a good thing. I mean, it really does depend on the situation, but don't underestimate such people. Again, people who know you well, people who you're familiar with. Indeed, that very familiarity is what allows them to manipulate you and to change your mind. But, I know that the word manipulation has a lot of negative connotations. Sometimes it's necessary to be manipulated. I suppose if you've got the wrong ideas about things and someone wants you to change your mind, then that's a good thing, isn't it? Mercury, I suppose, could also be about strangers. I suppose people trying to sell things. Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto could be about a clever salesperson. Mercury semi-square Mars could also be, I suppose, about having a sudden meeting with someone who just gets annoyed. Just being on the street, someone shouting, maybe shouting at you for no particular reason. Maybe people in general are going to be annoyed, but don't take it to heart. So, Pisces, overall, I actually think that you are in a powerful position, but there are some irritations, and certain people do need to be taken seriously, and you shouldn't underestimate the influence that they could have on you. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And what I want to do now is look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 51, which is thunderbolts. This hexagram represents a surprise. Something just happens. The Wilhelm translation of I Ching calls it the arousing. The arousing is just something happens. Everything is quiet. And then it all changes. And so we perhaps need to be ready for some kind of surprise, some kind of shock. And this shock or this surprise may, in the first instance, really shake us up. And we may feel that it is a complete disaster. So, what do we do? And so it's important that we are able to keep our cool and that we have a certain amount of flexibility, and also that we don't jump to conclusions. So just because something happens that we weren't expecting, but perhaps turns our beliefs upside down, does not mean that it is a huge disaster. It may not be any disaster at all. And with this hexagram, we get two moving lines. The second line from the bottom moves, and the third line from the bottom moves. And with the second line from the bottom moving, there's the indication here that we lose something. Something happens and we think, oh, it's gone, it's been lost. And there might be a real sense of concern and upset that we've lost something, something's gone, we had it, and now it's gone. So what do we do? What does the I Ching recommend? Well, the I Ching recommends that we don't panic. It's really saying that if we're patient, we will actually get it back. Now, I know that this hexagram is really for one day. You know, this is the hexagram. This I Ching reading is just for today. It's for Tuesday. But I think in this situation, if we find we've lost something, we've got to consider the time scale. I mean, are we going to get it back today or next week or tomorrow? It may not be today that we get it back, but we will get it back. That is the nature of the situation. So because we're going to get it back, we shouldn't panic. And then we get the third line moving. And with the third line moving, there's still this sense of shock that it's like things out of our control are making things happen, and we're not comfortable with it. And one way of translating this third line from the bottom moving, according to Greg Winkup in his translation of the I Ching, he talks about a lucky escape. The Wilhelm translation doesn't really, I think, talk about a lucky escape. So we may be in a situation that is really difficult, that it could be really bad for us, but we're able to get out just in time. And of course, we get out just in time, and whatever we thought we'd lost, we find a way of getting it back. Maybe we don't actually find a way of getting it back. We just get it back somehow. Anyway, this hexagram 51 Thunderbolts, it does transform to hexagram 34, the power of the great. So whatever has been happening with the Thunderbolts, whatever this shock was, in some ways, it seems to have made us stronger. Because 34 is the power of the great. It is about someone who is powerful, got a lot of strength. It's almost like a wild animal that has escaped. Well, it's like my dog. On those rare occasions where she gets out, when she realizes she's free, there's that 1-2 seconds where you've got a chance to get the dog, and then she realizes she's free, bang, she realizes she's got the power and no one's going to get her. And so that might be the feeling we've got with the power of the great. Of course, if you're a wild animal, you're a dog, yeah, you might have your freedom, but then what do you do with it? You run into a road and, get run over. So having that power is only half the battle. So you've got that power, you've got that recognition that you are free and that you can really bring this power to bear. And I think it's interesting that the 34, the power of the great, is happening at the same time as we've got Mars square Pluto. And I've talked about Mars square Pluto, and Mars square Pluto is about being able to exercise enormous amounts of power. Yes, we have a lot of power, but if we just use that power without thinking about it, then we could cause a lot of damage. And so with the power of the great, we need some sense of self-discipline. That is going to be really important. Yes, we're powerful people. We can make things happen. But if we push things too far, we will get ourselves into trouble, and it will be completely counterproductive. So it's great you've got the power of a great. Now it's got to be focused, and you mustn't feel that it needs to all come out at once. You need to choose your goals, choose your battles, and almost with that previous hexagram, we talked about the arousing thunderbolts. It's like maybe we're able to bring down that power of the thunder, rather like, with the Frankenstein films, isn't it? The thunder is the life force. So the thunder is here, and it's not just some external force that is causing us damage. It is a life force. And of course, we've got moon sextile sun. And I said it is very life-affirming. The thunder is life-affirming, as there's something going on out there, and we can bring this force to bear into ourselves, and we can actually use this force to get results. But we do have to be very responsible in terms of how we use this force and when we use it. And that is my forecast, my I Ching forecast for today. And now is time to look at what is going on in Europe. And there were elections. And so let's see what's happened. So we got the pictures up there. There's Emmanuel Macron. There is Marine Le Pen, and there is Jordan Bardella, who is he's kind of Marine Le Pen's protege. He's very young. I think he may be 28, but he is certainly a serious rising star in Marine Le Pen's party. What's it called? National Rally. Oh, that's a terrible name, but maybe it sounds better in French, but it doesn't sound like a very good name for a political party. So let's start by looking at the horoscope of the European Union. So I've taken this chart, November the 1st, 1993, which is when the Maastricht Treaty came into force. And so it can be seen as the latest chart for the European Union. There are previous charts. It's not the only chart. For example, when the Treaty of Rome was signed in the 1956? No, 1950s, when the Treaty of Rome was signed, you could take that. But this seems to be an important chart. And in fact, it is a very dramatic chart, because we've got the moon, conjunct, it's moving towards Algol. It's not exactly on Algol, but moon in Taurus, moon opposition Mars, Mars-Pluto conjunction. Notice that Mars-Pluto conjunction. That Mars-Pluto conjunction is very close, and it's opposition the moon. Now, and we've got a T-square between this and Saturn. Saturn is square the moon, Saturn is square the Mars-Pluto conjunction. And I've looked at this chart before, and it's kind of quite an incredible chart. And I think it perhaps shows how the perceptions of the European Union have changed, and also perhaps how the European Union has grown into its chart. So, thinking back to the 1990s, which was kind of peak European Union, maybe in some respects, or certainly the early 2000s. The European Union was a positive, happy place. You think of, everyone has their memories of, a lot of people in Europe did this thing called, what was it called? Interrail. What was it called? Interrail. So Interrail was this ticket that young European, I think you had to be a student, and you bought this ticket, and it might last for a month or so, and you could just travel by train all over Europe for free. And this Interrail thing was just was just an amazing thing for people to get used to their continent. And of course, it added, people had happy memories of when they got older, when they left university, and they remembered traveling around Europe and how great it was. And that perhaps created European cohesion, and it was just a happy place. And then we got this chart. This is not a happy chart, is it? And it's a power-hungry chart. Mars-Pluto conjunction, opposition moon, fixed, rigid. We have an idea about what Europe should be. We're in control. And Saturn is square the moon. Saturn is square Mars. Saturn is square Pluto. All that Scorpio in there. No offense to Scorpio, but in this case, Scorpio wants to be in control. And so it's grim, this chart. And I think perhaps, as time goes on, I do think with these national charts that, like with the United States chart, as time progresses, the countries or the organizations grow into the charts. And certainly, if you looked at the United States chart, maybe if you looked at America in 1820, for example, you wouldn't really see America in that chart. But by 2024, you're certainly seeing America in this chart. Now we are seeing the European Union in this chart. This chart has matured. Perhaps it was the Ukraine war and that's made this chart mature. The rise of the populist right, but Europe wants to be in control. It's aware that it's under threat, and so that is a chart for the European Union. Now, we had these elections. Supposedly, the right did relatively well. They certainly did well in France. So, how did these elections impact the European Union? Well, what we can do is we can just look at the transits for this. So inner wheel we've got the European Union. Outer wheel we've got the chart of the elections. And I mean, I've set these elections for 8 o'clock in Paris, which is, I believe, was when the polls opened in France. So it will be different for other countries in Europe, but the planets will be roughly in the same position. So Uranus was at 2438 Taurus. Uranus was conjunct the elections moon. Sorry, Uranus at the time of the elections was hitting the moon. The moon represents the people. Uranus conjunct the moon. The people are rising up. It's quite a populist combination. And Uranus is opposition Mars, and it's opposition Pluto. So that moon opposition Mars-Pluto has been completely triggered by Uranus. And probably what might happen is the European Union could overreact. People are getting upset. I believe that in Germany, the AfD, the right-wing, supposedly far right-wing party, I don't really know much about the AfD's policies, but they're sort of characterized as being far right, that the AfD is, I think they did better than the Social Democrats. So they did really well. But that's Uranus conjunct the moon. Uranus is stirring things up. Also, when we had these elections, there was Mars just moving into Taurus, and Mars was making a square to Pluto. And in fact, Mars is on the European Union's midheaven, 1 degree 45 Taurus, and Pluto is, that Mars-Pluto square is completely hitting the EU's midheaven, assuming we take it November the 1st. I've just gone for midnight. I know that one of my commenters reminded me of this chart and suggested I should be setting it for Maastricht. Well, I've set this for Brussels. I don't think it's going to make a big difference where you set it for, because this is the Maastricht Treaty, but I've set it for Brussels. And so Mars is on the midheaven, Pluto is square the midheaven, Europe has been really, really stirred up. And, this illustrates the point. Because Europe has a Mars-Pluto conjunction in its chart, so the Maastricht Treaty coming in, it's sensitive to the Mars-Pluto cycle. So it's not surprising that these elections happen when you have this Mars-Pluto this Mars-Pluto square. So what about the lunation before the elections? So this is the lunation before the elections. On June the 6th, 2024, there was a new moon. So just before. This new moon was at 1618 Gemini. And this is a new moon that we've talked about a lot. And if you look at this chart, I've set this chart for Paris. You will see that Neptune is on a descendant. Descendant that can be the EU's enemies. Neptune is perhaps that's something, or France's enemies. There's a certain uncertainty there. Now let's do an astrocartography for that. So let's just set up the map for that chart. I'm just going to set it for Europe so that we can see how that is working. So I'm going to set it, this is set for Europe, and whoops, we don't want that. So you see this yellow line here. This yellow line is all the places at the exact time of that new moon where Neptune is on the descendant. So you can see that this line goes through Amsterdam, goes through Brussels, goes through Lyon. It doesn't actually hit Paris exactly, but you can see the part of the world it's hitting. It's hitting Western Europe, and in particular Holland, Belgium and France. And it certainly seems that it's Belgium and Brussels, they've been hit by these elections. I don't know why. Are they that dramatic? But there's been a confusion about it with this Neptune on a descendant. People don't know what to think. Brussels don't know what to think. Brussels don't really understand it, but Neptune represents these vague fears. And of course, it's gone through France, and Macron has, I think, somewhat overreacted to this. And so I thought it might be a good idea to look at what's going on in Macron's chart. I mean, I've looked at this before. So turning to Macron's chart, here is Macron. And, just a reminder, Neptune is at 29 Pisces. I mean, I talked about this yesterday, but Neptune is at 29 Pisces. So he's got Neptune square his sun, because he's got a Sun-Mercury conjunction at 29 Sagittarius. And Neptune is square this Sun-Mercury conjunction. Now, I've said that I think he's confused. I don't think he's able to make good decisions at the moment. I think that Macron is... I think he's a politician on a decline. I think his abilities to make good decisions have gone. He is incredibly dangerous, really dangerous. And it's strange because Macron, when he first came into power as president in 2017, he always seemed to be the sort of adult in the room, and The Economist and The Guardian, particularly The Economist, seemed to love him. He seemed to be very sensible, and he was the one that was going to sort Europe out. And in the end, he's turned out into just being a crazy man, really. And I think this has really started to happen over the last few months. Things have driven him crazy. I suppose the Ukraine war has not been good to him. I mean, he's lost a lot of influence in Africa because he blames it on Russia. Rumours that a lot of foreign legionnaires got killed in Kharkov a few months back as a result of a Russian strike. Just he seems to be terrified of Russia winning in Ukraine and is prepared to do anything, include risking nuclear war. You know, this is the actions of someone who's crazy. We should bear that in mind. I don't think I'm exaggerating here. Because I suppose when you're a politician, a senior politician like Macron, you are an instrument of the cosmos. You abandon your individuality, and when you start to become an instrument of the cosmos, your mental health can often be seriously damaged. You just become, you could be made mad by the universe. Because maybe that's the destiny. The universe needs to make Macron crazy, because that's the way Europe is going. I don't know, but we can see this astrologically through Neptune, through the fact that Neptune is square his Mercury and square his Sun. Now, there are some things about his chart that I think we really need to be aware of. Firstly, Macron has Moon opposition Mercury. Sorry, Moon opposition Uranus. This Moon opposition Uranus is exact. Talking about the madness of Macron, I think that when this Moon opposition Uranus becomes exact, it's a potential in his chart to be very focused on himself, to be fairly unstable because it's Moon in Taurus, a fixed sign, Uranus in Scorpio, a fixed sign. There's a lot of arrogance there. We know he's an arrogant man, but Moon opposition Uranus, there's this tension that builds up, and that Moon opposition Uranus is semi-square the Sun. See, there's the Sun. So the Sun is semi-square Uranus, and the Sun is semi-square the Moon. So, and also Mercury as well. So this really tight connection between Sun, Mercury, Moon, and Uranus. Let me just show you that. Let me just show you this on a 90-degree dial, just to show you what I mean. See, there's his Moon-Uranus conjunction. There's his Moon-Uranus opposition. And there is his Sun-Mercury conjunction. They are opposition to each other. This is an incredibly powerful thing in his chart, and it does make him really dangerous. Further, it's all on the Aries point. So that is scary. And Neptune, transiting Neptune, is at 29... is what, 29 something Pisces. So Neptune is hitting all of this. So this point, the most important configuration in Macron's chart, is being hit by Neptune. So he's got all this power, but it's being sapped. It's going all over the place. It's being diverted left, right, and center. He doesn't know what he's doing. Really, he's dangerous. Neptune is causing major problems to Macron. He should be removed from the presidency. He is a risk, regardless of what you think about Ukraine. And then we have what has been going on with him and the election. I suppose so. This is the chart of the. This is actually the chart. No, that's not the right chart I wanted to look at. I wanted to start by looking at the chart for the first round of the elections. So the first round of the election is actually on June the 30th, and on June the 30th, Mars is at 15 degrees 25 Taurus. So if we look at that, French Parliament, so there's Macron's chart, and then there is Mars conjunct. Mars will be conjunct his moon on a run up to the first round, and Mars will be opposition his Uranus. So, he's going to be under a lot of pressure, I think, in the run up to these elections. Whether or not these elections will actually decide anything short term, I'm not entirely convinced. Though, I will be looking at very quickly at Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella's charts, but I just wanted to quickly turn to Macron's Vedic chart. Make sure I've got it somewhere. Looking at Macron's, because Macron's Vedic chart does just indicate perhaps when he started to lose the plot. So here is Macron's Vedic chart, and so what I'm looking at is his periods, his sub-periods. So, remember, Vedic astrology divides life into 9 periods. The 9 planets, the 9 planets of Vedic astrology, together they last for 120 years. So where is he at the moment? At the moment, he's in his Rahu period, which lasts from 2009 until 2027. So roughly speaking, 2027, his Jupiter period starts at the end of his presidential term. So that kind of fits well. And he is in February 2024, from until January, he is in his Rahu major period, Sun sub period. And his Sun is the weakest planet in his chart by this Shadbala, by 6-fold strength. And so, and the Sun is in his 12th house, which is an unfortunate house in Indian astrology, plus the Sun rules his 5th house. So things are not working well for him. And I think it really started in February. I think February, he sort of lost his luck. Whether or not he'll get his luck back when this Rahu Sun period ends, well, the short term, it ends, I think, in January. Will he get his luck back? I don't know. We'll have to have a look at it. But I think, he's still going to have Neptune going back and forth in the last degree of Pisces next year. So that's not good. Also next year, Saturn, from a sidereal perspective, remember Saturn is in Pisces using Western astrology. Actually, using Vedic astrology, Saturn is actually still in Aquarius. And in next year, Saturn moves into sidereal Pisces using the Vedic system. And I think that happens, I think it happens about April 2025. So here is Macron's moon. So what happens when Saturn moves into sidereal Pisces is that his Sagittarius period starts. Now, the Sagittarius period is the 7 years when Saturn is in the sign before the moon, the sign of the moon is in, and the sign after the moon. So that's when the whole Sagittarius period is operational for Emmanuel Macron. Now, we all have Sagittarius. It's for 7 years, we all get it. It's not a big deal having Sagittarius, and it's very hit and miss. But I think in Macron's case, I have this hunch that Sagittarius is going to work. I think it's going to be bad. And so as his presidency comes to an end, he will be moving into the Sagittarius will be starting. So things are really starting to collapse around Macron. And I think, that doesn't mean to say that these elections that he's called are going to be a big deal. So I looked at some other charts. Marine Le Pen. Again, I've looked at Marine Le Pen's chart, and I don't know. I always have problems with Marine Le Pen's chart. I don't think she's actually got a very good chart. So here's Marine Le Pen's horoscope. She's born August the 5th, 1968. She's got Saturn in Aries, Saturn in the 8th, and it's Saturn in Aries in the 7th. I think that is a problem. She's got this Mars Saturn square, and in terms of like what's happening to her at the time of the first round of the election. What is approximately going on here? Okay, I think she benefits here from the fact that there's Venus. Venus is... So this is a Cancer. So she's got midheaven at 1941 Cancer. So Venus is moving towards her midheaven. And I think that is good. Venus is a slow-moving planet. It's a very fast-moving planet. But I think that she can perhaps benefit from that, and the Sun will be fairly close to the midheaven. So maybe having Venus on the midheaven during the first round is going to help her. This might be a good time for her. It's also her nodal return. So you can see that she's got the South Node. Marine Le Pen has the South Node on the ascendant. It's not great having South Node on the ascendant. South Node on the ascendant can damage one's reputation. I suppose you could say that Marine Le Pen has always been perhaps damaged, perhaps with her association with her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen. But with her South Node return, I wonder how fortunate that really is. It's not great in terms of a successful election. That makes me think that my feeling is this election is not going to be, as I said, I don't think it's necessarily going to be a big deal, at least for her. Although you could say that with Marine Le Pen, she is perhaps starting to embrace her karma by thinking about the next generation of leader. She's got North Node in Aries in the 7th. That is where she should be going. It's about thinking about the other. And I suppose you could say that she's having her nodal return. So North Node 1130, really close. I think this is an important election for her. It's very much part of her destiny or as a leader, and maybe it's about her having to give something away. Though I'm not convinced yet that I can say that it's going to be good or bad, this election. But who is she going to give the thing away to? Who's the next generation? And a lot of people are asking about Jordan Bardella, And here is the horoscope of Jordan Bardella. Jordan Bardella was born September the 13th, 1995. His Saturn is at 21 Pisces. So his Saturn is not in Aries. There's his Saturn. So in other words, yeah, he has not yet had his Saturn return, but his Saturn return is very close. Saturn, remember, Saturn goes retrograde at 19 degrees 26 minutes Pisces at the end of this month. So it goes retrograde pretty close to his natal Saturn. And if we look at his chart and the elections, so there we can see there's Saturn, there's his Saturn return. So it's a real Saturn return experience for him, I think, these elections. And so he's going to have Mars conjunct his moon, but I don't see anything really spectacular about these elections. Looking at him, looking at Marine Le Pen, maybe people are not going to be satisfied. Maybe Macron is going to think that these elections are going to solve problems, but they're probably not going to solve any problems at all. And I should point out that just after these elections, there is a full moon, and I want to just look at this full moon because it's quite interesting. This full moon is not that one. There is a full moon on July the 21st, 2024. So this is a full moon just before the Olympics. I think, and the thing about this full moon is that this full moon is at 29.8 Capricorn. So this full moon, if you look at Macron's chart, this full moon is right on his ascendant. So remember that this full moon is at 29.9 Capricorn on July the 21st. So looking at Macron's chart, this full moon, is right on his ascendant. This is important. This is about a realization. And Macron sees the truth and he understands the truth. He gets the truth. And I think it could be quite difficult for him. And this full moon, by the way, also hits Marine Le Pen's Mars. Marine Le Pen's Mars is at 29 Cancer. So these are important points. Sort of Marine Le Pen, actually, her Mars is on. Her Mars is exactly on Macron's descendant. So there's plenty of scope for her to really wind him up. Okay, I understand in the last couple of elections he has managed to defeat her, but still she doesn't go away. But I think this this whole thing just illustrates the point that Macron is not in a great stage of his life, and I think things are getting worse, and that's okay if he was just an ordinary person. But the trouble is Macron is president of France, and as we've seen, both from a Western and Vedic perspective, things are falling apart for Macron, and I don't think things are going to get any better. And it's a shame he can't step down early, but I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, those are some thoughts about the election and about France. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did find this video interesting, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. Of course, only subscribe if you find this video useful or interesting. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.